Everyone that today's proceedings will be recorded and will be subject to delayed broadcast on the Council's website. In terms of the Sudarian, if you hear your name, if you could confirm your attendance, please. Councillor Maitland. Here. Provost Todd.
Here.
Councillor Friel.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Mackay.
Present.
Councillor Barton.
Here.
Councillor Holland.
Here.
We have an apology this morning from Councillor Lennox. Councillor Crawford.
Yeah.
Councillor Watts.
I'm here.
We have an apology also from Councillor Filson. Councillor Hogg.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
And Councillor Stewart.
Maybe.
I'll call again for Councillor Stewart. No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. I just call for any declarations of interest. I don't see any hands. That's fine, thank you. So we'll move on to, well, we have no hearing this morning, so we'll not be going through the hearing procedure. Agenda item number 2, on to agenda item number 3. And that's the planning application number 20/0305/PP. And this is for a change of use of vacant and derelict land to provide temporary tourism accommodation in the form of glamping posts at land to the rear of Burnside Cottages, Lugton. And that's East Ayrshire by Mr. John Sharp. And that's on pages 5 to 87. And who's taking us through this one? Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The application before us today is for a decision on a local application which has received more than 10 objections and therefore requires to be determined by the committee. The application site is an elongated strip of land located within the Rural Protection Area under the provisions of the East Ayrshire Local Development Plan of 2017. It's located out with the settlement boundary of Lugton in the countryside, but adjoins the village of Lugton. Adjoining the site to the north and northwest are residential properties and an open field, whilst running along the application site to the south and southeast is a railway line. The road is located to the southwest of the site, where the east and southeast opposite the railway line are trees and open fields. The current planning application is for a change of use of vacant and derelict land to provide temporary tourism accommodation in the form of glamping pods. The proposal is solely for the siting of 5 number pods, an office reception building, a washroom shower block and a play area, all within the western portion of the Red Line application site. Further details, members, follow in your report, starting at paragraph 7. As members will note, there were land ownership issues that had been raised to the council, and these have been explored with the response to those matters starting at paragraph 14 of your report. And that means that officers are clear that the application can now be presented to you for your consideration and determination. If you can bear with me, I'm going to try and see if I can share my screen. Can't see it working. That's coming now. Okay, just give me a wee sec. I'll put it onto slideshow. Okay. Okay, hopefully everybody can see this. Here we have the Red Line application site, as you can see here. In the middle of the application site is actually an access track that takes you up to the railway signal box for Lugton. On the Kilmarnock to Glasgow line. You can see here, members, that you've got the village of Lugton over here to the site, and you've got residential properties, which you'll see in a few moments in the photographs, that immediately bound the site, and there's a residential property here as well. You have the railway line, which runs up to here, members, where the cursor is, and then you have obviously the main road, A735, which takes you down to the junction with Lugton. And down here, members, is North Ayrshire, and we're still in East Ayrshire here, obviously, but we are quite close to the boundary. A little bit more detail for you, members. Here's a plan that was put in by the applicants, just to show you the Red Line site from their perspective. You can see the access track there. This area shows kind of wooded land. A lot of it's quite scrub land, members, as you'll see in the photographs in a minute or two. Okay, we get into more detail, members, about the site layout. Here is the cottages I was mentioning to you earlier, and we have the railway line here, and here is the access track that comes up to the site, and you can see the reference to the signal box there. You have the glamping pods here, which you can see are angled towards here, towards this direction. You have a play area, and you have the office and store, and you have the washroom shower block there. You can see the design of the pods is pretty simple. Timber buildings, fairly kind of shed-like, and that really is about it, members. You'll see in a bit more detail here. Here's the pods themselves, and you'll see the internal layout there, members, which is fairly simple. Here, members, is the office reception building. And here we have some photographs that start of the site. This is just the access into the site here, members. You can see this is the railway bridge, obviously, with the railway line. We're looking at the direction of going back towards Dunlop at this point. Again, just standing actually at the entrance, looking towards the railway line to go back towards Dunlop. This is looking back down towards Lugton. You can see the kind of former Cannyman restaurant there, which I think is now called the Scotch and Rib Eye or something like that. But it's just to give you your bearings, and that's on the Barhead Irvine Road there. This is just looking, standing at the access, facing opposite, looking at the house across the road, which is directly opposite the application site entrance. This is now turned back the way, looking into the application site, and you can see the track that takes you up towards the signal box. The development is to take place on either side of this track. Just further up, members, looking at the track. This is just looking at standing members, looking at the scrubland that's currently forming part of the site. That's looking back towards the entrance to the little house there, members, as well. Again, just further back in the lane. This is, members, you can actually, there's quite a drop down from the sort of top part of the site, which is up here, and this takes you down to those the properties that I was telling you about on the plan a minute ago. So you can see that there is quite a drop, so that the pods would be up at the top, and you can see there's quite a drop, and then you can see there's private gardens. You'll get a better photograph in a minute. That's looking back up from some of the private gardens, members, up towards the top of the site where the glamping pods are supposed to be. That photograph, I think, members, is fairly telling about privacy, etc. You're standing top of the embankment, looking down onto the site, looking down onto the sort of residential properties next door. You've got a terraced row, a single detached dwelling, and there's another 2 terraces as we kind of go off the screen to the right there, members. That's just illustrating the scrubland and some of the terraces that it would face onto. Again, standing on one of the properties, looking back up the embankment, you can see that there isn't that great amount of tree cover, etc., on the embankment there, members. And that's just, again, the access. That's the single dwelling house that's just to the right-hand side of the access. You can see, again, members, that there isn't a great amount of screening from one site to the other. Just a couple of images of Lugton looking back towards the site up there, members. That's some of the properties that we've just been looking at the back gardens of. The 2 terrace rows, the detached property, and there's another terrace. But you can see just at the very back there, that's the site just in behind these homes. Again, just looking back across the site from Lugton. This is the local development plan map, the adopted local plan. You can see that the site is up here. You can see Lugton, and the site is within the coloured area, which means it's in the rural protection area, where we would quite closely examine in more detail allocational need for properties to be there. That's me, members. I'll stop sharing now for the moment. Okay, so turning back to the report, ARA has no objections, albeit it is noted that the proposed layout plan doesn't show the location of any on-site parking. ARA Flooding, Environmental Health, SEPA, Health and Safety Executive, Scottish Water and other consultees do not object. We have received 30 individual representations to the proposal, all objecting to the application, and we don't have any letters of support. The objections are summarised and responded to in the report, but in brief focus on roads, traffic and parking, impact on residential amenity with overlooking, noise, disturbance, disruption and privacy concerns to existing residential homes, impact on the railway line, natural environment impact and antisocial behaviours. The report also clarifies where an objection point is material and not a material planning consideration. Excuse me. Sections 25 and 37(2) of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act as amended requires that planning applications are determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. For the purposes of this application, the applicable policies are all highlighted within the local development plan. It's these policies that have been considered in detail in your report. As explained in the report before you, the proposal isn't in accordance with the policies Res 11, IND 3, Tour 1, Tour 2, ENV 8, ENV 12, or overarching policy OP1. The material considerations are obviously outlined as well in your report, and on balance are not supportive to the extent that the provisions of the development plan should be set aside. It's considered that the principle of development, if approved, would have a significant adverse impact on the amenity of residential properties adjoining the application site and would have adverse visual impact on the character of the local environment at Lugton. Proposed development, due to its adverse impact on residential amenity, visual impact on the local environment, and lack of amenities and facilities within the locale, and the limited accessibility in regard to access to public transport, makes the site unsuitable for tourism-related development as proposed. The lack of a detailed and thorough business plan does not inspire confidence that the proposed business has long-term potential and viability. It's clear that the proposal would have substantial amenity and visual effects on the site and surrounding properties. The detail of the proposal already made clear are likely to cause unacceptable harm to the residential amenity of adjoining properties, as well as the character and appearance of the area. The lack of detail around certain elements of the proposal, combined with the sensitivity of the site and the weight of third parties' objection, combine to add further unacceptable harm to the effect of the proposal on the amenity, character and appearance of the area. Therefore concluded that the modest benefits of the proposal would be significantly and demonstrably outweighed by the harms and adverse impacts that have been identified in the report. I would advise members in conclusion that the planning system seeks overall the right development in the right location. The planning system effectively advocates sustainable development. If we consider SPP as Scottish planning policy, it seeks exactly that, in that we want to guide the development to the right location for future growth and work in the overall public interest. And that's further explored in paragraph 124 in your report. This development is really the wrong development in the wrong location. It doesn't seek to protect residential amenity of nearby homes, and we don't consider it to be appropriate to the rural location. It has many significant deficiencies and issues which do not add up to a sustainable form of development. The application is therefore recommended for refusal, subject to the reasons detailed in your papers on Appendix 1 at page 84. Back to yourself, Chair.
Thank you very much, Fiona. A very thorough report there. And I'll now open it up to members. Members, do you have any questions, observations, clarification? Robert Todd.
Thanks, convener. If I can ask people to go to page 49 of the paper, it's the large paragraph at the bottom. And again, I'm not against these types of developments at all. I do agree with the reports. It might be in the wrong place, but the thing that does it for me is the impact on sewerage and the lovely wee hamlet of Lugton. That has to be addressed in the future, where it's up to the residents to come to some sort of discussion with the council and roads. Is up to them. We will help if we need to. But that says it all for me, and I would go with the recommendations, convener.
Yes, please. Councillor Mackay, you're still in mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very happy to go with the recommendations also. Thank you.
In that case, I'll ask if any other members are otherwise minded. That's unanimous. Then we go with the recommendation for refusal, which is on page 5. Thank you very much.
Just to confirm, the decision of the committee is that the application has been refused for the reasons detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. And the next item on the agenda has been pulled.
Yep.
That's item number 4. We are no longer looking at that today. So if we can look on to agenda item number 5. It's the planning application number 22/0612/TP, and it's for 1 ash and 1 sycamore for the complete removal at Cessnock Castle, and that's the B7037 Galston, East Ayrshire, and this is by Stephen Cogley.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Right. Thanks, Chair. The application is before you today because it has been received for land where a member of the council has an interest. The application site is Cessnock Castle in Galston, which is an A-listed building with castle gardens and an area of ancient woodland. There are 2 trees proposed for removal together, both grouped together within the lands of Cessnock Castle, allocated at the bridge over the Haymouth Burn. The application form advises that both trees are growing out of the bridge and the cracking and subsidence in the bridge is obvious. Both trees are covered by a blanket TPO within the estate and the applicant is seeking the removal of the trees. If I can just ask members, I'll turn back to the screens and hopefully share my screen again. Okay, doke. So here we have Cessnock Castle, and here is the actual bridge, and you can see over the Haymouth Burn there, members. We have the 2 trees side by side. You can see them, the 2 trees there. Here's just a couple of images for you, members. You can see the bridge here, and the trees are just on the side of the bridge here. Better picture here for you, members. This is the first tree, which is right at the very edge of the bridge. This tree is slightly further over, members, than the applicant had said. The applicant had said in the form that both trees were actually at the bridge. This one's just slightly further over, but this is the first tree there that's right at the sort of butting of the bridge. So that's the 2 trees that are scheduled for removal. We don't have a neighbour notification process for tree works. In terms of consultations, we have consulted our senior arboricultural officer. The arboricultural officer is very clear that both trees merit removal. He has said that this tree here, members, is affecting the bridge and the structural integrity of the bridge. And the second tree, which is set further back, is in itself requiring also to be removal as a very poor specimen. You can see it's about multi-stemmed here, members, and he says it's not a good tree at all. And he's very clear that both trees can be removed. In terms of the local development plan, the policy is compliant with OP1 and ENV9. Looking at material considerations, there's none there that would recommend the application be refused, and the application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. So full tree protection order, but in this case, it's been recommended that the trees are removed, and the recommendation this time is on page 119. Item number 24, if you want to just check there. And it says, subject to the conditions in the appendix to this committee report. However, there is no appendix to this committee report, just in case you're looking for it. Sorry, no conditions or an appendix. So over to members. Any questions?
No.
Okay, can I? Oh, sorry, Councillor Lord. I'll get there, Provost.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I would bow to David Law's experience. I know how passionate he is about trees, and he will fight to preserve trees if they're needed to be preserved. But I agree with him in this instance. He's a professional, and it is causing damage to the bridge. So I do know that there's a big tree growing programme going on around Cessnock Castle, so that's good. I agree with the recommendation.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Watts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, you know my view on trees. I try to have them put everywhere, but yeah, I would bow to this. I think we need to move with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Watts. And there have been tree removals and replacements in the past, but in this instance, there is no need to replace them as they're growing out of a bridge. So I agree with the Provost, and I also agree with Mr. Law. Is anyone like otherwise minded? No? Okay, thank you very much. So recommendation 24, we approve.
Thanks, Chair. The decision of the committee is that the application has been approved for the reasons detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. And we go on to agenda item number 6. And this is an interesting planning application number 22/0002/S36. And it's an application for section 36 for battery energy storage systems with maximum installed capacity of 300 megawatts at Kilmarnock South Substation, Treeswood Head Road, Kilmarnock. And that's in pages 123 to 161. And over to Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll keep this presentation fairly brief. Obviously, the committee report itself sets out the detail of the case, so I just intend to provide you with an overview and focus on some of the key issues. The Council received a consultation request from the Scottish Government for an application made under Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 for the proposed Kilmarnock South battery energy storage system, as the generating capacity is in excess of 50 megawatts. The Council, as a formal consultee in this process, requires to provide a response to Scottish ministers to the consultation and can either offer no objection to the Section 36 application as submitted, offer no objection subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions and/or legal obligations it considers necessary to make the development acceptable, or object to the application, stating the grounds on which the objection is made. As you can see from the slide on the screen just now, the application site would be located approximately 1.2 kilometres south-east of Kilmarnock, just off the C53 road and adjacent to the existing Kilmarnock South electricity substation. The site layout can be viewed here. The proposal would include up to 42 battery energy storage units of up to 3.5 metres in height, an HV transformer compound for 2 transformers, and these would be up to 9.5 metres in height, and they're located around about the sort of south of the site there where the cursor is. Control rooms, switch rooms and other associated infrastructure as detailed in paragraph 9 of the committee report, including access tracks, acoustic fencing, which is up to 4 metres in height, and lighting and security columns, which are up to 6 metres in height. Additionally, an attenuation pond is proposed to address water runoff from the development site, and a cable route to connect the battery energy storage system to the existing substation is also proposed. The development is proposed for a temporary period with a construction period of approximately 12 to 18 months and an operational period of 40 years. After this, the development would then be decommissioned and the site restored and aftercare undertaken thereafter. The following slides provide an overview of some of the key infrastructure proposed, including the modular battery energy storage units themselves, which can be viewed there. The HV transformers, which these are the highest features of the site at 9.5 metres in height. And this slide also shows the 2 proposed cable route options at the moment to connect the existing to connect up to the existing electricity substation. Only one of these routes would be taken forward by the applicant. At the moment, there's 2. There's the orange route, which is located to the south, where the cursor is there, which would run along the road and go over the existing Balgrey Bridge and track round to the rear of the substation, or it would route along the southern part of the proposed application site and be tunnelled under the burn and go along the northern part of the substation. The Council has consulted a limited number of internal consultees, whilst the Scottish ministers have consulted more widely on the application, as they are the determining authority. Of the consultees contacted by the Council, none have raised any objections to the proposed development, subject to conditions in many cases. The consultation undertaken by Scottish ministers has resulted in a number of responses from various organisations, most of whom do not object to the application, often subject to conditions. The exception to this are SEPA, who have a holding objection in place at present regarding the lack of information to satisfy them that the flood risk has been fully assessed. Work is ongoing by the applicant to address SEPA's comments, and there has been ongoing work and dialogue between the 2 through the Scottish Government to address the flood risk issue. In terms of the Council's consideration of the impacts of the proposed development, in general, the Council is satisfied that there would be no unacceptable impacts on the matters under consideration, such as ornithology, ecology, trees and woodland, historic environment, roads, traffic and hydrology, subject to conditions to secure appropriate mitigation. With respect to traffic impacts, ARA would want to see a construction traffic management plan be submitted for approval, which would include, amongst other things, restrictions on construction traffic routing. In addition, ARA are seeking appropriate passing places to be formed on the C53 road, and the applicant would require to ensure that all necessary consents were in place and such passing places were formed prior to any development commencing for this development, should Scottish ministers consent the development. The Council's Environmental Health Service, along with the Council's noise consultants, Acon UK Limited, have advised that acoustic barriers should be installed to mitigate noise from the proposed development, and this can be secured by appropriate conditions if consent is granted. Looking at the application site itself, this slide provides a view from the northwestern corner of the site, looking towards the southeast corner. From here, you can see the existing substation visible through the trees to the south of the site, which has an influence on the otherwise rural area and has established the presence of electrical infrastructure within this area. This view is taken from the southeast corner of the site and it's looking northwards. From here, you can see the slope of the land with a higher elevation towards the north before sloping downwards towards the south of the site. Here, the top of the roof of Midton of Balgrey can be seen in the top right of the photograph, just about there where the cursor is. This is the nearest residential dwelling to the application site. This is the view from the southwestern corner of the site, just looking northeastwards. Again, you can see the slope of the land from this view and also the roof of the farm and the outbuildings from Midton of Balgrey. And this is a view towards the northeast of the site, looking towards the southwest, located over the hedge, roughly where the cursor is just now. So the C53 road runs along that boundary there. And access would be taken from the existing access into the field, which would require to be widened to accommodate the construction traffic. And again, you can see the existing substation to the south. This is just a picture of the burn which runs along the southern part of the application site. As noted, in terms of considering the impacts of the proposed development, it is considered that subject to conditions, it will be possible to mitigate the impacts associated with the proposed development. In terms of landscape and visual impacts, these represent some of the most notable impacts. The proposed development would result in a locally significant impact on the landscape, given that the field would change from its current agricultural use to a developed electrical infrastructure site. This, however, is not dissimilar in character to the existing substation on the adjacent land. This slide shows the existing view from an elevated position to the south of the application site, looking towards the proposed site. And if you see roughly in the centre of the image there where the cursor is, that field there that's been cut, that's actually the application site there. The applicant provided a number of photo montages from a select range of viewpoints throughout the area to assess landscape and visual impacts. This was one of the locations, and you can see on this next slide, this is an impression of what the development will look like from this location, year one from construction. It's maybe not exactly clear, unfortunately, from the slide there, but you can see here you would have the acoustic barrier and some of the lighting columns visible from this perspective. At this stage, you would see some of the battery units as well. Boundary planting is proposed to provide screening of the development, though obviously at year one, it would not be tall enough to screen the development. This next view, again, unfortunately, maybe not entirely clear on your screen there. This is also a photo montage of the development at year 15 from construction. Obviously, the image is a little bit primitive in terms of how the screening is displayed, as it's just showing a solid green block. But the intention is to show that once the perimeter landscaping has established and grown in height, it would provide reasonable screening of the development, particularly from closer proximities. The council would seek a detailed landscaping plan to ensure vegetative screening of sufficient depth and species composition is delivered and implemented to ensure the site is adequately screened to mitigate visual impacts. As noted, Midton of Balgrey is the closest residential receptor at approximately 60 metres from the application red line site boundary, although infrastructure itself would be located at a greater distance, and this is more of a setback from the site boundary. This is the view from the access road to the property just to the west of the farm buildings themselves. From here, the electricity substation can be viewed to the south, whilst the proposed battery energy storage system would actually be located behind the hedgerow to the right. So it's not going to be within the field you can see there, but actually to the other side of this hedge, on, behind this hedge. The applicant provided a viewpoint from this property at the access road, and they confirmed that from here, due to the topography and existing screening from the hedges, the proposed development wouldn't actually be visible from this property on the ground floors. They noted it may be possible from the upper floor of the property to view southerly parts of the development, such as the HV transformers. The property is orientated in such a way that views are primarily towards the north, with only limited views of the proposed development likely. Visual impacts from this property are not considered to be unacceptable. As noted previously, in terms of noise impacts, provided that appropriately designed acoustic barriers are implemented as part of the development, this should mitigate noise impacts from the development, and such acoustic barriers, including their details and design, can be secured by appropriate conditions. In terms of financial implications, the applicant has not provided a decommissioning report with associated costs for decommissioning the development and restoring the site, so we have not been able to consider a suitable financial guarantee for the decommissioning and restoration of the site at this time. Should Scottish Ministers grant consent, however, the applicant has confirmed that they will enter into a Section 75 legal agreement with the Council to provide a financial guarantee, and the Council would expect negotiations on a suitable financial guarantee to progress as the Scottish Ministers consider the application. Should the committee decide to object to the development against the recommendation, then this will trigger a public local inquiry, and this would result in financial implications, and including potential costs incurred in engaging expert external advice, support or representations giving evidence on the Council's behalf at any inquiry. So to conclude, it is considered that the impacts associated with the proposed development can be suitably mitigated, and this can be secured by appropriate conditions and legal obligations. All consultees have raised no objections to the proposal, with the exception of SEPA, who are currently considering details submitted by the applicant in respect to flood risk of the burn, which runs through the southern part of the application site. SEPA, the Scottish Government's advisors on the environment, including flood issues, and the Council considers that as such, SEPA have the expertise in such matters to be able to advise Scottish Ministers in that regard, and the Council would expect any recommendations or conditions requested by SEPA be reflected in any decision taken by Scottish Ministers. As set out in the committee report, it is recommended that the Council raises no objection to development, subject to the conclusion of a Section 75 legal agreement between the applicant and the Council prior to the issue of Section 36 consent and deemed planning permission by the Scottish Government, or agreement to the satisfaction of the Planning Authority or another arrangement to secure a legal obligation to include those matters listed within the legal implications section of the committee report, and the attachment of deemed planning and the attachment to the deemed planning permission of planning conditions to address the matters set out at the end of the committee report, the detail of which will be agreed by the Planning Authority in discussion with the Scottish Government and the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Very thorough reports again. I'm actually going to ask Craig from Legal, Craig Young, if you can explain the position on this one, as we are consultees to this, which some of you may not have come across before. And I'd also like him to explain Section 75 as well, if that's okay, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Graham, as part of his presentation, I think has already covered some of this regarding not only the Section 75 but Section 36 position. But essentially, members, if we turn first of all to the question or what we're talking about in terms of Section 36, members, you'll see from the papers on pages 123 and 124, and particular paragraphs 3 through to 5 of the report, an explanation of and the context that we're dealing with this application today. Essentially, we are dealing with this application in terms of Section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989, rather than the normal town and country planning legislation. In terms of the Electricity Act, it primarily deals with matters relating to electricity generating schemes, as is mentioned within the report. So in many cases, and where those members who have been part of this committee for some years will know, we do get applications from time to time under Section 36 of the Electricity Act, where the generating station that or generating scheme that we're talking about is a wind farm. So in those circumstances where there is a differentiation is over the capacity of what is being proposed. So where the application would generate less than 50 megawatts of electricity, it's dealt with under the town and country planning legislation. If it's more than 50 megawatts, then it's dealt with under the Electricity Act. And why I mentioned the fact that many members may see this come forward in terms of wind farms would be, I think at the moment, in general terms, the generating capacity of some of these wind turbines that you see is around 3 megawatts. So essentially on that basis, where, for example, a wind farm may be proposing 17 turbines in general terms or more, and I know the generating capacity of some of these turbines may be improving through great strides in technology, but essentially where it's say more than 17 turbines, you would expect it to be dealt with under Section 36 of the Electricity Act. That's just to give it a context. Here we're obviously talking about a battery energy storage system, but it's the same thing. Because it's dealt with under the Electricity Act, it means we're not determining the application. So we're not the determining body. So that's why it's different to a normal planning application. You're not deciding it today. What you're being asked for is your view. And the reason being, as Graham has said and the report sets out, we're only a consultee in this process. It's the Scottish ministers that ultimately will make a decision on this application. So our views will be considered with the views that have been expressed by other bodies like SEPA, with the West of Scotland Archaeological Association, Nature Scotland, a whole raft of consultees. So while it's not the kind of same analogy, it is a similar analogy that we are effectively like a community council response in a normal planning application, albeit we are an important response because depending on the view that we express today, I think as is set out within the legal implications section of the report, could also potentially trigger a public local inquiry to be held on particular issues. Should or would members consider that rather than the recommendation before you today, you'd be looking at objecting on certain grounds. So we are a bit more, well, not to diminish or dilute, the community council responds to a normal planning application because they clearly do have an important role in the planning application process. In a Section 36 context, with our views, clearly it could have the potential to trigger further processes like a public local inquiry. However, I think the main thing to take from this today is we're not determining this application, so no decision like planning permission or anything else would be issued following this committee. We are merely being asked for a view that would be sent to the Scottish ministers, and it will then be for the Scottish ministers to then determine this application, having heard from us and others on what is proposed. In terms of the reference to Section 75, that is a reference to Section 75 of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. Essentially, what that is making reference to is the terms of a formal legal agreement that would be entered into by the council, by the applicant, and also the landowners would also require to be parties to that agreement. The reason being that a Section 75 agreement binds the land. In other words, any obligations that are imposed or put in place through that agreement would have to be registered in one of the national land registers, whether it be the Register of Seasons or the Land Register, and therefore it binds the land and any subsequent landowners, depending on the nature and extent of the obligation. However, in this instance, clearly what we are looking to do will be to make sure that through a Section 75 agreement, we have in place arrangements for a planning monitoring officer, as well as appropriate arrangements for, you know, a restoration, decommissioning aftercare, financial bond as well, in order to protect ourselves and others once, you know, either the development comes to an end so that the land is appropriately restored, or should something happen to the applicant during the currency of their consent, should it be granted by ministers, that would require the land to be restored. So it's about putting in place appropriate obligations that we think are required to also assist in making this development acceptable under the Electricity Act. You'll also have seen from the report an important distinction as well from the Electricity Act is that while it makes reference to such things like flora and fauna and natural, you know, habitat, etc., it's not necessarily making reference to the development plan. But from our perspective, the thing that we would go and look at is the development plan, because that's where we do consider these things, as well as, you know, the Scottish planning policy, given and other material considerations. So that, in a nutshell, I suppose, is when we talk about the code for a Section 36 and code for a Section 75, what we're actually meaning, in a kind of long road for a shortcut manner, in terms of what we're looking to do. But effectively, we're not deciding it, we're being asked for a view.
Thank you very much indeed. So members, do you have any views? Thank you. Councillor Field.
My view is that it's a good thing as long as the SEPA can come up with the, or they can come up with the right solution for SEPA to satisfy them about that burn.
Thank you, Councillor Friel. We do have Kevin Braidwood here from Rhodes, if anybody has any questions. Provost Todd.
Thanks, Convener. I agree with Ellen. The flooding part, that I know the area well. I live near to it, and there is a massive floodplain there in that locale, just off the 77, in times of extreme weather. So I've just got a concern about that. The other one is the roads part. Are there any concrete timescales when they would like to start? Is it all part of the decision-making process before they come up with a plan when they're going to start? And included with that is, I really appreciate what Rhodes have said, that it's keeping it away from the built-up areas, from the urban area in Belfield, Shortleys, Rickerton. But that in itself brings a lot of complications, as Kevin's very aware, because coming up the road from Galston to Bolton, and you turn right at Five Ways, it's a real 90-degree turn. And if there's any real HGVs going round there, that's a small hamlet that's going to have a massive impact. So it's all about that planning process of transportation, whether it's big Arctics or trucks that are more amenable to the road. Also on the road, and a great idea about the passing places, when the construction phase is finished, it would be good to understand what their thoughts were on, do we keep the passing places that have been installed if they're at a good state, or are they reinstated to the road the way it was? Because I'm understand about the impact on maintenance if there's a new additions to existing roads. The road's actually in quite good condition. I drove up there the other day, and it's a lovely wee area. But it's just about the flooding and the roads part. Section 75 will be very interesting to see if it's passed. The Scottish Government pass it. It'll be interesting to see how the local community can maybe get something out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. Kevin, can I bring you in? And can I add one more question to the Provost, just to maybe move things along a bit here? Can we guarantee no road closures? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'll take the Provost questions first. In terms of vehicle movement to the site, etc., our team will closely monitor the detailed construction management plan that will be submitted by the applicant. In terms of the passing places, there would be a section 56 that would have to come through our office, although I would be quite happy to take those passing places on at a future date after the development. In terms of the Chair's question, at this moment in time, I can't guarantee if there will be any road closures. That's a discussion that would have to be had with the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you a little bit for the final one. Does anybody else have any other views out there? Okay, so are we satisfied that the screening plans, the flooding plans that are left with SEPA, the replanting and the roads, we're quite satisfied to express our view, and the recommendations are on page 1, 2, 3, and it's item number 2, and there's 2 recommendations and they've been thoroughly explained by legal here. So if anybody otherwise minded, we're quite happy to agree with this.
Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you, Maureen. Lots of nodding here. That's them. Thank you. Over to Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. The decision of the committee is that the council raise no objection to the development, subject to the conclusion of the Section 75 legal agreement and to the deemed planning permission for the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, members. That's the end of today's planning committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I